Today we're going to be doing the conditioning backend for all of our client data. So just as a summary of what we've done so far, we created our client roster. This houses all our names so that we can use them and not make mistakes in any other sheet, any other data place. Everything matches the exact name with their age and gender and categorization population. Then we made pretty much the same thing with our exercises. We defined them further as we needed to in order to make programming easier going forward. This stuff, there's a lot here that'll make more sense once we go into the programming software and how I've made mine and how you can make yours and stuff like that. And then we did the weight data backend. So that means we can take a sheet or a program or however you do things, record all of the client's weights based on their actual name, and that makes sure that it always gets saved as the right way, no misspellings or anything like that. Same thing with exercises, no misspellings, and in the long term we can use this in order to create max percentages and load percentages and assign weights automatically so we don't have to think about it. We can automatically pull the most relevant one, etc., going down the line. So today, excuse me, we're going to be doing the conditioning backend. So we're going to start a new sheet here, call it conditioning data, whatever you want. We are going to have the headers, same thing we do with every sheet. Color, I'm going to bold them, and then I'm going to center them just for me. And the left side here, this left square in the top corner of our sheet, you can click on, and then that will select every cell that exists in the sheet. I'm going to change the font just because I like to. You can also press Control A. If it doesn't work, it selects like a random piece because you've already put work into it. Then just press Control A again, and this should select the whole thing. So, what we're doing, similar thing to the weight data. We're going to have the name. And in this category, we're selecting the whole thing, control clicking on name, data. We're going to check our name ranges just to make sure. I'm going to cancel this. Check our name ranges just to make sure that we know the appropriate name that we're going to be using in order to input the client roster in here. So we use client roster, no space in between. So we're going to go data, data validation, add a rule, drop down from range, client roster, and hit enter. Again, I like to go arrow, press done. So now, same thing, we can have individual clients set up here. Okay. Now, what I prefer to do is put the date here because this will relatively be the same when I input most data for programs. Also, I'll always just be like, yeah, we're going to take some of the best sets. I might even do all of the information from a program cycle just to make it easier as opposed to fighting for dates all the time. So I put this here just from a workflow perspective. You can put this anywhere. We're going to select this column, unselect date again with control click. We're going to go to format, number, date, just so everything works well for us. January 22, January, Jan 22, June 22, just so everything works for us. And the format just auto inputs in the appropriate way. Great. Now, we're going to define the modes. So these are the types of conditioning tools, the way that you condition the bike, the elliptical, the treadmill, the rower, the skier, whatever you end up using. You can go as specific as your even schemes. So let's say for all your athletes, you always do 300-yard shuttles. You could do that in here, or you could just define it as running. That's up to you. So we're going to put in mode, and then we're going to go select this again, control click, data, data validation, and this time we have nothing to look up, so we're just going to use drop down, and we're going to input the actual things that we use on a daily basis for conditioning. So for our clients, salt bike, rower, ski erg, and sometimes running. We do sled work and stuff sometimes, but I put that in more in the strength section than anything in the weight data, just because it makes more sense to me. And it's less to track in here, and sled work as a conditioning tool in our facility isn't the best thing. It's really more strength work with some cardiovascular and higher heart rate benefit. We're going to go heart rate, we're going to go to arrow. So that also prevents us going from allowing multiple selections. We don't want to allow multiple selections. Press done. Now, you should have whatever you input here in those drop downs. So, assault bike, rower, ski erg, could also be running. Okay? I'm going to widen this out a little bit just so we can see everything visually. Now, almost always, there is going to be a time format, meaning whenever you do conditioning, there's going to be a time frame. It's going to be in seconds, it's going to be in minutes, maybe it's in hours if you're training some endurance athletes. So we always want to include time because that is a variable that always exists no matter what we're doing. So from that, we have to define other variables that are almost always generally there. I think of this as targets. So, for example, a client on an assault bike, they really have a couple options. They're going to go, I'm going to write this over here. They're going to go for time, they're going to go for distance, they're going to go for calories. That's it, pretty much. You could have, set wattages and stuff, but that's all just still like distance, time, calories. Those are the three real metrics that you can chase on any of these tools. Okay? So, this doesn't work super well for complex conditioning schemes and intervals and stuff like that. We'll go into a little bit of that later and why. Also, it doesn't work well for running. I highly recommend if you're actually going to be training like true endurance athletes, this is not where you're putting their stuff. Unless it's just pure zone 2 work or like mileage work and stuff like that. So, time, we have to put in distance, and this depends on your tools. You put your distance in for miles, and you put your distance in for meters. The reason we do this is because our ski ergs and rowers are set to meters, our assault bike set to miles, running set to miles. I live in the US also, so we use miles for things instead of meters or kilometers, whatever. I have two. That's what I keep here to make sure I have enough data. You can go crazy with data on the conditioning back end and a ton of different things. I'll show you kind of what mine looks like when I simplify it for this. So those two things are going to be there from now on. Then the other thing that we can do is calories. From there, I care a lot about like RPE for conditioning because if it's not hard, it's pretty irrelevant for the stuff we do. Pretty much everything that we do for our clients is under 10 minutes. So if it's not hard, it's pretty irrelevant stimulus. So I want to make sure that I know that. I will often not even put in conditioning data if I don't have an RPE for it because I think it's relatively useless information. Unless I know that it was hard. I'll put it in myself or guess about it. So we put an RPE here. Now, these are things that I care about knowing from a selfish perspective for data to understand relationships better, and I'm actually getting to a point where I think I can start to understand them in my sheet with enough data. But it's also important, depending on your machines and tools, in order to determine how hard it was. Because I think that the resistance on a rower or ski erg, the thing that controls the fan and how much air gets intaked into the fan, changes how hard the thing is. It changes the stimulus a little bit. That is called the damper. It's the actual term. So we put damper in here. And that's a number from 1 to 10. And then I also care about, on our assault bikes, our average RPM, average cadence, whatever. Because that tells us how fast they were going. That's not always equal. Like, you can't always know exactly from the time in miles and calories how fast they were going. It just adds another buffer to figure things out and be like, well, if I want to do a sub 5 minute 2 mile, what do I need to do? I need to be at an average cadence of probably like 35. You can also do this for wattage. We just use cadence because it's an easier number for our clients to look at and to use. So that's what we use. You could also just put an average average watts here, whatever metric you want to use, that's fine. For my case, average RPM. Now, from here, I'll do a couple things. If I care about heart rate data, because I use that often, that is something that I can now put in. We don't use it very often with our clients, but with my endurance athletes I do, and personally I do. What I will do, I'll say max heart rate, I'll say average heart rate, and I will say 1 minute heart rate and 2 minute heart rate. Those are all things that I care about. You don't have to do them. You could leave heart rate completely out of here. These are optional. So I want to know the max heart rate that was hit during the conditioning thing that we did. I want to know the average heart rate across the whole thing. This is something I care about more. And I want to know after you were done, if we're being really picky about things and I really care about cardiovascular development, I want to know what your heart rate was 1 minute exactly after activity. It's basically your recovery and tells us a lot about how you bounce back and how efficient you are aerobically. And I also want your 2 minute to see if you stay high longer because there's something going on neurologically or whatever. That's more selfish data for me. Now, this further categorizes things for AI use later to be able to filter things out. We're going to put in zone 2. This basically is my metric of yes, no. Is this true or is this false? So you could do a couple things here. You could unselect this and you could insert checkboxes all the way down. So you go insert checkbox. Sorry, I didn't show that. That will put in whenever you check something off as true in the actual format, so you'll be able to just filter by true, false. You could also put in yes, no. Like if you want to type it, doesn't really matter. I'm going to put checkboxes in. This just tells me like if RP isn't enough to determine, like when I go for a run and it's 40-minute run, 50-minute run, and it's at a 12-minute per mile pace, that information is not relevant to me when I'm talking about like true conditioning and energy system development. When I'm wondering like how hard can I push this person, that's a totally different thing, and I want to be able to filter those out. But I also want to know from a weekly perspective how much mileage we're doing or time in zone 2, stuff like that. Just me personally. Again, these things are going beyond like what you need to do. I would cut you if you were just working with an average population and you weren't doing a ton of endurance athlete work. I would just have these as the things you care about, especially, and some things you may cut off. Maybe you don't row or ski, you don't need damper. Maybe you don't assault bike, you don't need average RPM. You have to tailor it to your facility and what you want to do with your clients. Now, this was something that I played with doing because I don't have the dates. Like this would be just a program. It wouldn't be like, oh, on week 1 of this program, it was, 3 weeks earlier, January 1st or whatever. So I do multiple sets. So say we do like 4 by half miles on the assault bike, like 4 sets of it. I want to know that those aren't separate things. So I want to know that you didn't do across 4 weeks, like half a mile every week. I want to know that you were fatigued on set 2, 3, and 4. So I just put this in here. This is another yes, no, or check boxes. Again, filtering for the future. If you have specific protocols that you want to match with things, this is another way to do it. So you could say protocol here, select this, data validation here, add rule, drop down arrow, and then you could name things. So like let's say it's like four something that we do often is 4 by 0.4 mile on the assault bike. Something else that we do often is 4 by 250 meter on the ski or the row. Something else could be 1,000 meter time trial. Like this tells us that this thing that I did was a 4 by 4. So let's actually make this real. We have 4 instances of information here. They're all assault bike. My distances were all 0.4. These were all multiple sets, and it was the 4x4. This tells me that this just makes information extremely specific. Again, you don't need to do more than average RPM, time, distance, calories, RPE, damper. This is just how I get incredibly specific with things. And I think specificity is very important if you care about data long term. The last thing that I care to know is, was it on a treadmill? So insert checkboxes again, or you could do yes, no, either one. I care about this because running on a treadmill is fundamentally different than running outside. A 2 mile time trial on a treadmill will be probably easier on it than it will be outside. I just care, again, to break up information and data. You do not need most of this in order to help your clients do better. This is if you care extensively about knowing how to make improvements and to analyze data in the long run. Something I care about and I'm going to be working with a lot. That's why I'm making some of these videos. Okay? So, this is the core of what you need for your conditioning backend. I'll say it one more time. You don't need much more than this. The rest of this stuff, I'll even make this a different color, just for, I can't even see with these on, make it yellow. You don't need that. This is the stuff that we care about. This is the stuff that if you're interested in more data, you make decisions off heart rate, stuff like that. You want to see 1 minute recovery, you may pick some of this. I would just want to see 1 minute recovery and average heart rate. That I would make most of my decisions off of these two. These two are selfish in nature. I want to know more about the information and be able to analyze it better in the long run. So, the last thing that we need to do, column D, time, select. Format, number. So, we want to make sure that this is a duration so that it's the same across the board. We don't want to say 30 seconds, like just 30s in there. We also don't want to say 1 minute and 30 seconds. Like, we want to make sure it's solidified across the board right now. So, duration, click. That makes it so when I put in 90, 0, 0, 1, 30. This is 1 minute and 30 seconds. So you see how this is 12:01:30 a.m. I don't know why that's happening, so we're going to reselect this. Format again. Go down to duration now that there's information in there, and it should be fixed now. Let's see if it does it again. 02:15 or 25. Okay, it's fixed now. It might have just not worked because there's no information in it in the first place. So when working with this, let's just make sure that we understand that that number here is hours, minutes, seconds. Okay? So when you type it in, you do have to go 0:00 for minutes, and then type in your seconds if it's just a seconds thing, whatever it is. Okay? So let's actually give this real data. So 0.4 is something we might actually see is like 47 seconds, 48 seconds, 48 again, and gas out on the last one, 51. Something we might actually see. So that is most of the stuff that we need. It's pretty much all the stuff that we would need in order to make conditioning data make sense in the long run. If you use other conditioning tools, you will have to add their metrics. If you use other things, other schemes, if you use specific testing, like, you can add all that in there and just make it make sense for you. So going forward now, we can start to talk about how to actually use exercises, how to use data on the back end, weights, and actually make max outputs, and start to build even a programming software in Google Sheets that works for you. There's a lot of direction we can go from now. This is the core of the backend that you need. You need a place to put all your clients that exists and stays up to date and is the same, because then it updates everywhere else. You need an exercise library. It has all your exercises and how you intend to use them. Again, this is how I split this up, is an aggressive way of using it. You need the exercise category if you program by it, probably one subcategory, maybe two, but you can also put that in the category. We could just say single leg knee dominant. Like, that's fine. I've used that before, and even my current program software, I use it like that because it made more sense when I was building it to be less specific, because I was launching my facility at the time. You need an associated 1 rep max, and you need the 1 rep max percentage associated with that exercise if you program off of percentages and loads. Difficulty level is entirely my system. You don't need to do this. You can just self-select off of what you know. And I will go into the system someday of how it really works. Verbal cueing is just for interns and teaching people. Short video link is, again, for interns, teaching people, and online programs if I'm interested in that. Long video link, teaching and coaching. Progressions and regressions if I want other people to understand how I would tell them to do an exercise. Interns and coaches. So if you're a solo show, you don't need a lot of this. I would encourage always to overbuild when you know that that's the right direction you want to go, but do not overbuild if you are already struggling to get things going. I would never have, my programming software isn't perfect now because I did not want to overbuild, because I needed to run it, I needed it to work, I needed to make sure it could work, and I knew I was going to learn a ton along the way to make it better, that I didn't want to erase everything I'd done. Part of the series, I'm going to be building a new programming software that's going to be much better. Okay? So, don't stress about that. Do what you know. Do what you need. For most people, you're going to have exercise, you're going to have category, maybe a subcategory, and if you program off of percentages, you're going to have these associated 1RM and associated 1RM percentage. That's what most people need. You don't need the rest of this. Okay? So, on that note, thanks for watching. We're going to be going into how to actually use this stuff in the next couple of videos. See ya.